HR can make your life super easy as a leader, or it can be a pain in the butt. HR is your make or break in being a great leader and developing your team in the best way, which is why this week's episode is with the amazing Lisa Young on how to leverage HR to lead better. Lisa Young is an HR coach, digital educator, and founder of HRHQ, an online community and education platform for HR professionals. After spending over a decade in retail, sales, and operations, Lisa identified her talent and passion with people and chose to pursue a career in HR. Since then, Lisa has partnered with hundreds of employers and managers to develop their leadership capabilities, grow engaged teams, navigate day-to-day employment situations, and be more strategic in their approach to people management. Her focus now is in helping others in HR to do the same. Lisa is passionate about elevating HR's reputation, advocating for superior HR practices, and equipping HR professionals with the skills and knowledge to make a real impact. If you are a people leader, an HR professional, or wanting to step into either of those roles, this episode is for you. Let's dive into the conversation. Lisa, hello. We finally made it to your recording for Lead with Less. I'm so stoked you're here.
Thank you for having me.
So, Lisa, I love the work that you do. Considering my background is also HR, I love that you're still in the space. And I really wanted to do this episode with you to talk about how we can leverage HR better as people leaders and how we can build better teams. So before we jump into some of the juicy questions, why HR? Why is this your sweet spot? And why is it a key function to help leaders be better?
Look, HR wasn't my first kind of calling. I didn't start my corporate career in HR. So for me, I've always loved strategy. I've loved building solutions, solving problems, which is why I spent, I guess, the earlier part of my career in sales operations. So for me, though, I enjoyed the challenge of it, and I enjoyed, like I said, building processes and making things better, faster, smarter. But my last corporate role, for example, was in photocopier sales. So my efforts might have led to customers getting their photocopier faster, or maybe we had better insights of how many black and white prints they were doing versus color. Whereas to me, HR is where that strategy kind of meets people. So the impacts of the work that I'm doing, by making things work better, I'm actually really literally impacting people's lives and changing their lives. So when I did find HR, I came into HR from leadership. So I was in sales operations, moved into leadership, and then really saw and felt the impacts of working with people in that. So yeah, for me, I guess down to the question, it's where strategy meets people, and that's why it's my sweet spot.
Why is HR a function that leaders need to care about, or at least need to make an effort with? Because look, let's face it, HR doesn't always have the best reputation, depending on the kind of organization, depending on the way HR has been positioned within an organization. But it is a critical function that leaders do need to utilize. And if they leverage it well, they can get so much from it. But why, at its core, is HR a function that leaders need to care about?
Yeah, you're definitely right. I think HR quite often gets overlooked as a key partner because of those misconceptions. And it could be a failing of the business, like you said, it could be the positioning, but it also could be the HR person, let's be honest. Maybe they aren't taking the right steps and actions to get their brand out there and help build that understanding. For me, why is it a key function? It comes down to a lot of leaders are promoted into leadership because they excelled as technical experts or as individual contributors, not necessarily because they had really honed leadership skills that they were demonstrating. So a lot of people do get promoted into a role because they were the best at what they were doing. And whatever path they took, the studies that they completed, the training they received, were likely focused on the doing of the work, not on leading others to do the work. I don't believe that the trades or people studying IT, I don't believe there's a section of their studies that are all about having effective conversations and engagement and feedback. So I guess that's why investing in leadership development is so, so important. But it's also where a resource like HR can become invaluable, because that is our area of expertise. That is what we study. That is what we trained on. And it's what we do every day. So we've probably dealt with a lot of the things that you're going through right now. We've come out the other side of it. So why stumble through it or figure it out yourself when there's someone you could learn from who's done it or done it the wrong way maybe, and can share insights on the mistakes that they've made and what they learned from those. So it's a subject matter expert at your beck and call, really. I mean, if you needed to improve your financial acumen, you would go see someone in finance. If you needed to get better with the tech in your business and then learn how to better utilize technology, you'd go see somebody in the IT team. So it's exactly the same. If you've ever done one of my programs, I often talk about the relationship between HR and leaders as being like a pilot and an air traffic controller. And I think that's really important because in that relationship, a pilot, they're in charge of the flight, right? They own that plane. They make all the decisions about the way that flight is operated. But an air traffic controller is somebody who is there and available with a different perspective, different insights, different information available to them. And they ensure and support that pilot to provide direction, coordinate their efforts, mitigate risks. So for me, I guess it's a really similar relationship. The pilot can't know and see everything. So during flights, during takeoffs, during landings, the air traffic controllers will monitor the aircraft position, track other aircrafts, review the risks, weather conditions. And obviously, the more turbulent the flight, the more guidance they might need. But ultimately, the pilot retains that authority and the decision making. So it's a collaboration between the both of them. So you could be having a smooth sailing flight and things are going great. And then suddenly, turbulence could be an employee issue. There's somebody there who has skill set and expertise in that area. Engage them, use them. So that's how I like to compare the two.
I love that. I've never actually heard of that analogy, metaphor. I never know which one to use.
Yeah.
But that way of describing how that relationship can work. And that's so true because I think a lot of HR people can also get disheartened by the fact that they don't have authority or they don't have control over the process or the decision making, but actually seeing how they can utilize that position. But also from the leader's perspective of going to HR isn't about relinquishing your control over your team, over the decisions that you're trying to make. It is about gaining that different perspective. And I think also often, if we're talking more about those like early leaders, those emerging kind of new leaders, they have very narrow exposure of their leadership skills and their potential because they're in those first couple of years. So they only know maybe that business or maybe that team or maybe that role of which they're stepping into. But the HR function or the HR professional that you're going to talk to, they may have 5, 10 years of HR experience, but across different organizations. So yes, they're giving a different perspective, but they're actually giving different perspective across multiple different problems, solutions, arenas, industries, services. And so, yes, you're getting a different perspective, but you're getting years and years and years of different perspective, right? So, and I think sometimes leaders can get stuck in of like, oh, well, this is the solution because this is the problem of where it is. Well, actually, your better solution could be something from a completely different industry that you may never have thought of. But that HR person could potentially open your eyes to that because they've worked in that industry. And that's definitely something that I experienced. I jumped roles a lot. People would look at my CV and be like, oh, you're not a reliable person, which now that I'm in the work that I do now, it's like actually the hugest benefit ever because I've worked in so many different environments with so many different people and across so many different problems that my exposure to solutions is a lot bigger. And I think that's one of the things that leaders don't lean into when they think about HR. It's like, oh, well, they're just going to tell me I can't do this thing, or they're just going to tell me that I need to follow this rule. But actually, they could just open your eyes in such different ways that you may never even have thought about before.
Absolutely. And one of the things that I say most commonly when I am supporting a manager through a tricky situation is, what is the outcome that you would like to reach? And then let's see how I can help you get there or offer a better alternative. So I think it's all about empowering them to feel like they're in control. And you talked about the years and years of experience as well, but it's also remembering that we're dealing with people, like unique, unpredictable, different people. So there's no, if we were in IT, there'd be a button to press or a fix. If we are in finance, maybe it's an Excel algorithm or there's some kind of thing to do to
A pivot
get a
table.
solution. But there's no such thing in HR. We deal with people. So when you come to HR, I personally, I've been in HR coming up 10 years next month. I have been very lucky to be in high volume ER, very lucky or unlucky, but a lot of experience. So I know I've done last count more than 250 different disciplinary situations. So I've seen it all. If you're a leader and you think, gosh, I've got this employee and I'm really struggling with their engagement, they're late all the time, their attitude, like, God, I've seen every different unique situation of how that could play out when it's gone wrong, when it hasn't gone wrong, what worked, what didn't work. So come and have a chat with me. let's bounce ideas. Tell me about this person. Let's come up with an idea on how to approach it.
Oh, goodness. Yeah. The amount of times a manager kind of reluctantly comes to you and they're like, so I've got this problem. I don't know how to deal with it. Oh, mate, seen that. This is how we can work through that. These are
Yeah.
some ideas. And they're like, oh my gosh, relief. And and I think such a big part of that is that reputation piece, right? Like what is the way that we're telling the story about the function and how leaders can really lean into that and buy into that.
Mm.
But one thing that I did want to ask is, having been in HR, I know, and we talked a little bit about reputation and that it can have with managers and employees, but what do you believe the cost is or the impact is when leaders don't use HR to its full potential? So what's the cost to them, to their team, to their bottom line when they just try and do it themselves? They just try and figure it out. What does that cost? Like, what does that impact? Can we make it really tangible for people, leaders who are like, HR, can't really be bothered, don't really want to build a relationship?
Mm.
What's the cost of them not doing that?
Yeah, and I really liked that you talked about the bottom line because a lot of people see HR as with dollar signs over our heads, right? We are not a revenue generating function. We are a cost to the business. So it is much harder to be able to see that value instead of maybe a salesperson or something like that. So I think it is really, really important though to recognize there is a financial cost. When I am working with people, especially when I'm just getting new to people who maybe are feeling a little bit apprehensive about working with HR, I like to just summarize HR as simply saying, my role is to help you achieve your goals through your people. And whatever that looks like, I don't know. That's what we'll work on. But you have goals, you have a purpose, you have a role scope. You need to make something happen for the business. And I'm going to help you do that through your people. So I think in terms of cost, if you are not utilizing HR correctly, if you see them as a transactional role, purely compliance, or the old HR police and where you go when things go wrong, then you are probably one, coming in too late and definitely not utilizing them the best way possible. So some costs could be the people impact isn't given enough consideration. You can be very laser focused in your role. And of course you are. If you are the IT manager, a team leader, a supervisor, you are there to deliver a service or a role. So sometimes that people consideration isn't given the very, very first thought. How will this impact our people? How will our people respond to this change? What impacts will this have? And how will our people, feel as a result of these things? So allowing HR into the conversation, having a seat at that table ensures those kind of conversations are happening because you could have an incredible strategy and an incredible plan, but if it's not executed in a way that's going to resonate with your people and those impacts haven't been thought through, then it can go terribly wrong. And I've seen it go really wrong. Other impacts would be opportunities for leadership growth. If you're a leader and you want to be a better leader and be promoted and move into more senior leadership roles, then you want to grow your capabilities and your skills and your competencies. And someone in HR working with them can help you do that. I also think, in my experience, short-term thinking often takes precedence over long-term strategy. And I don't know if that's personally just me. I studied strategic HR management, so I come at things with a very strategic approach. And I know most HR practitioners in my world do too. So it kind of helps you think longer term as well. And obviously, the more obvious things like issues aren't addressed quickly or correctly, which can make things worse. And then also just less diversity of thought. Like we said before, we can come with such a good perspective. So I think, yeah, there is a lot of impacts if you were to not engage HR. Obviously, those impacts can be detrimental, but by engaging HR, we talked about the cost, and it really is as simple as a more highly engaged, happy team is going to produce better results. So important.
Yeah, I love that. And that short-term focus is such a key part of that because I mean, as humans, we do that inherently, right? We're always prioritizing the short-term decision, the short-term comfort, the short-term benefit over the long-term cost. It's like, okay, well, how can I just deal with this thing quickly versus what is the impact that this is going to have over time? And
Mm.
that's often where HR can be really helpful because, as you say, they're looking at it from the organizational perspective, or at least the department. They're not only focused on the team itself.
Mm.
They're really linking, if they're good, they're good at what they do. they are really linking it into those bigger decisions, those long-term decisions, and it can really help you build your own strategic thinking capability. I think that's one of the things that I believe leaders can really leverage from HR is depending on their own leaders. So if they have great leaders in their hierarchy, if we want to talk hierarchy in that way, but if they have great leaders that can develop their strategic thinking, that focus on those things, that have opportunities, if they don't have that, then HR can actually be a really great place to get that, to at least get them to ask them those questions, to at least stretch that thinking. It may not be direct, like, I'm going to teach you how to be a better strategic thinker, but it can be those coaching questions that can help stretch that strategic thinking, which I think is really important.
Definitely. I often tell people inside my coaching programs that my favorite part of HR is having a leader sitting in front of me, pad and pen at hand, and just writing furiously as I'm speaking and saying, I hadn't thought about it that way, or that's a good point. And that's where I feel at home. I just know that I'm really helping expand someone. And as a result, like I said, helping them meet their goals through their people.
Yeah. And even just being that example as well can then prompt them, how are they doing that with their people,
Mm.
which can be really important.
Yeah.
I love that. So what are some signals or some signs that leaders aren't leveraging their HR team in the right or best way? I don't know if right or wrong is the language, but maybe in the best way, in the most helpful way. What are some red flags that they might be seeing in their own leadership or in their teams that can be like, oh, there's something I'm missing here. There's maybe something I can reach out to the team or I can do a little bit more here. What are some of those things that they might see?
Yeah. I think if you're a quote unquote bad leader, if you're not doing a great job, I think the signs will definitely show up, whether it's disengagement in your team, high turnover, conflict, maybe the team are resistant to you, there's a lack of innovation, there's misalignment. Even if you're not a bad leader, even if you're a really, really great leader, there's definitely, you could be missing key opportunities to do even better. You maybe don't even realize that there's more that you could be doing or that you simply don't know what you don't know. I think the disconnect kind of happens is leadership's a bit unique because as a leader, you're not directly on the receiving end of your own leadership style. You don't feel the impacts of your behaviors or your decisions. So you might think that you are approachable and clear or empowering, but your team might be experiencing something very different. And I guess that happens because you're experiencing your view through your intentions, but the team is actually experiencing it through the impact of it. So it's not about what you think you're doing. It's, I guess, how it's being experienced by your team. And so having someone in HR who can even just be a mirror to that, even some of the best leaders I've worked with, I was attending their team meetings. I was attending their sales meetings, their revenue strategy meetings, whatever that looked like. So I was just sitting there. I was there. I was part of it. I was learning. It was really helping me to better understand the team and their stresses and their pain points and their achievements to be able to help partner with them better. But at the same time, I could then after that meeting be like, hey, I really liked your approach here, but maybe next time, X, Y, Z. I think if you're a really terrible leader, so it sounds awful to say, but if you're a terrible leader, I think it'll show. If you're doing okay and you're a good leader, it doesn't necessarily mean that because all those things aren't happening, that there isn't room for growth and more that you can be doing.
Mm, yeah. Yeah, I love that. And this is not about saying you're bad or good.
Yeah,
we're not trying to identify that. We are looking at, because I think this is one of the key things about leadership that maybe a lot of leaders aren't guided to or coached on to do early on. It's you need to pay more attention to what's happening with your team than what you're doing. Because I think often when we step into leadership in those first few years, we're very, is there a better way to say this? Like self-obsessed. Like, oh my gosh,
Yeah.
am I doing okay? Am I doing enough? Am I helping my team? And that's all good. It's important to be self-reflective. And it's even more important to pay attention. Like, as you said, disengagement, resistance, lack of care, just not going above and beyond. Some of those things, those are the things that you actually need to look for. They're not always going to be so apparent that you can see it, but you need to be the one that's actually paying attention and looking at those things and going, okay, what is it that I'm missing? And it's not necessarily that you always need to have a fix or you need to step in and do something to fix it, but what is it that I'm missing and who can I talk to help me fill that gap, to figure out how we can close that, whether it is just maybe I need to listen more instead of talk so much. Maybe I need to ask more questions instead of
Mm,
telling what to
mm,
do. And I don't think that this is only early leadership stuff. I've worked with directors. I've worked with leaders who've been leaders for 15, 20, 25 years, and they still have some of these behaviors that actually stump teams, that do create an impact that isn't where they want it to be and that isn't where they want it to go. HR can just give that mirror, go, okay, well, can you talk me through what's actually happening? Can you talk me through what your contribution to that is? What do you think you are or aren't doing? And again, just being that advisor and that coach is such a key part of it.
And you can engage HR at either end of that. You could come to HR and say, my team's really disengaged and I have no idea why. Great, let's chat about it. Or you could come to HR and say, my team's really disengaged. I've sought some feedback. I've done some research. I've looked into these things. Here's the plan I've created. I'd love to get your thoughts on it before I execute. So you can come at whatever end of the spectrum that you're in.
And I'll also say you can come to HR before any of those
Yes,
things
absolutely.
happen. So it's, hey, my team is actually doing really well from we're meeting goals, we're reaching targets. How can I sustain that? How can I make sure that my team continues to do that? Or you're coming up to a change process, or we're 2025 now, but 2024 was a rough year for a lot of companies. How amazing would it have been if a lot of leaders said, look, I've got a really high performing team. I know that we're about to go through a really rough patch. There's going to be job cuts. There's a lot going on. How can I protect my team? Like, how can I support my team? Or another one is you're a new leader or you've just been promoted. Hey, I'm new to this role. How can I get the best out of my team? Because I think this is also the other red flag that I would say is you're waiting too late to talk to someone.
100%.
Something's already a problem. An issue, like I talk about issues and problems. So it's like issue are those kind of small little things that it's like, oh, it's fine. I just won't talk about it. Oh, I just won't deal with it. But then those things compound into the problems. And then it's when it's the problem, or when it feels really hard to change, that's when I'm now going to HR. And then that's when it feels really, in my experience anyway, that's always when I've had the most resistance, when people have come to me when I've been in HR, because it's already such a big problem. It's like, if you just had come and talked to me like 3 months ago when this thing first come up, like I wouldn't need to tell you to do this and this and this, because we would have been in a different place. And so the other aspect there is like, as soon as you step into a leadership role, or as soon as you're in a team lead role, or as soon as you get promoted, or you start with a new team, like actually just build that relationship and be like, hey, what can you tell me about my team? This is what I know about my team so far. How can I do better for them? Or how can I get better out of them? And I think that's another key one that I think doesn't happen enough. It's always the problem that connects HR versus the proactive. Nothing's wrong, but I actually just want to do things well.
Yeah, definitely. And speaking on behalf of the HR community, that is just a dream for us. Imagine if we could move from the reactive, where we spend most of our time, into the proactive. I would so much rather spend my days coaching, helping managers improve their capabilities and their skills and their competencies, rather than spending my days fighting fires, dealing with disciplinary performance challenges. That's, yeah, definitely a dream for us in HR.
I mean, we don't want to be the people that deal with the problems. Like,
No, I mean, there's got to be somewhere, right? But yeah, I wish that more companies were prioritizing that leadership development piece to prevent the challenges. Maybe you wouldn't need as big an HR department, or maybe the HR department's focus would be entirely different.
yeah, I mean, it always bewildered me how many HR advisors and HR BPs there are that just focus on ER, and ER again is reactive. It's already a problem and now we're dealing with it. How could we actually be reducing that? But anyway, that's a whole other
Yeah.
the whole other conversation.
Yep, that's that.
What are some benefits and positive things that leaders can experience from leveraging HR? I know that we've already spoken about some of them around getting better out of my team or sustaining them a bit more, but are there any other benefits that leaders can get from utilizing HR to support themselves and to support their teams?
Yeah, I definitely think there's all the predictable answers to this question, like improved performance, better alignment, better engagement. For me, though, I think it all comes down to creating more confidence. So whether it's just getting validation for your ideas, getting a second opinion, having somebody to bounce off, just being able to get reassurance. I think when I was a leader, I didn't have that in HR. I had that in other leaders. I had that in my leader, thankfully. But I could just imagine if I had known about it, certainly wasn't a reflection of the HR team at the company. I just didn't know that that was an option that I had. So having someone that was in my corner that I could call on and feel like I could just be open. It's a safe space. It's a sounding board. It's someone who's really also truly invested in my success that I could just lean on and plug into when I needed would be so valuable. And had I known, I can only imagine how much faster I could have grown my capabilities.
Oh, yeah. The courage and confidence piece. It's building your courage then equals more confidence. And yeah, just having someone in your corner. Because, yeah, like as you say, if you have a great leader, that's so lucky. And I think, I mean, my whole mission is to kick out mediocre management and create legendary leaders. Like that's my ultimate mission, my ultimate goal. But that isn't our reality. Across my 13 years in HR, I maybe had 3 leaders that I was like, you a standout. Like, and two of them, no, one of them, sorry, wasn't even my formal leader. She was a senior BP in my team. And I just looked at her and I was like, oh my gosh, you're amazing. And that's wild that in 13 years, that was my experience. 3 people. Like, and I jumped jobs a lot. And a lot of that actually had to do with leadership. It's the way that the team was run, the lack of the way that the team was run. And I was in HR, so I don't know if that's telling. But yeah, like if we utilize that department, those people with those perspectives, those ideas, that capability to give so much more than what we have, I feel like leadership will just be completely different. People's experiences of work will be completely different. And yeah, I think that that's so, so important. I think we need even more of that.
Oh, 100%. And I think even if you've got a fantastic leader, which I really hope you do, but even when you're having your one-on-one with your leader, there's still deliverables. There's still, your discussion is probably consumed by where's this project at? How are we going with this process? And maybe there's a 10-minute tack on in there where you talk about how's the team doing? What challenges are you experiencing? What more could I be doing? But engage with HR and let we just push away all of the kind of technical deliverables and let's just talk about your people, your team, your capabilities, how you're feeling, where are you looking to grow and develop. You can have a discussion completely about you and your growth and your development. So the best leaders that I've worked with and had the best relationships with were the ones that engaged me proactively. We had a standing one-on-one in our diaries and we would just chat and they wouldn't cancel and say, oh, nothing, everything's fine this week. They would turn up and they just want to chat about what's happening in their team. And often those discussions were what led to a lot of those more strategic discussions or about insights. They'd tell me about some key things that they were working on. And I would say, oh, considering the people impact, how do you plan on communicating that to the team? Oh gosh, hadn't thought about that. So it's that proactive engagement and just being really open to those discussions is really, really powerful.
Yeah, and the key thing you said there was not canceling when nothing's going wrong. That's the default. Like, oh, there's nothing happening, so I'm just not going to talk to you. It's like, actually, that's kind of where the best conversations happen. As you say, it's leading to those strategic conversations. That actually leads us really well into the next part. What are 2 to 3 practical, maybe easy, simple ways leaders can start leveraging their HR team to lead better? What can they do?
I guess the first one, if you haven't met your HR person or spent much time with them, then you need to change that. So even better, put a standing meeting in their calendar. Like I said, it could be monthly. If you're a newer manager, it could be fortnightly. Or if you are really confident and maybe don't feel like you need that intimacy, then it could be quarterly, but have something in there and stick to it. Even if quote unquote nothing is going on. It's an opportunity for the both of you. It's an opportunity for them to get the insights about your team, about your strategies, about what's going on to be a better HR partner. But it's also a chance for you just to get that coaching and get that insights and that development. So that'll be my first one. Get HR in your calendar and not just when things go wrong. Just have them in there as a standing meeting. The other one that I mentioned before was bringing HR into your team meetings where possible. Can they sit in on their team meeting? Can they come to your sales meetings or your whips or whatever that looks like? Again, it's really going to help that HR person be a better partner because they better understand. They can speak your language. They know what's happening in your team, good and bad. But it's also really great for brand awareness. Your team will see HR sitting here listening in, contributing to a discussion about the team, and you can really see them in action and see that they are invested in the team's success as well. The third thing I guess I would say is take the time to reflect on your areas of development. I'm sure in your work you will do some performance reviews or something with your manager, but take that information, whether it's maybe doing a skills inventory or a gap analysis of some sort, and just really identify the areas that you do want to grow and work with HR to make a plan for. So you might sit down and be like, gosh, my communication is holding me back. I feel like my messages aren't being received well enough. I'm struggling to activate my team, get outcomes that I want. Maybe communication area I really need to work on. And then engage HR and say, here's the area I've identified for myself. How can you help? It could be that they can put you in touch with programs or people inside the business, or they can just work with you as part of their regular coaching. So yeah, for me, getting something in your calendar with your HR person, bringing HR into your world, helping them understand your world, whether that's team meetings and stuff, and also just doing a bit of a assessment and reflection on your own capabilities and see where HR could help and proactively engage them to do that.
I love that one. And in particular, the second one, I know that there'll be some leaders that'll be like, absolutely not bringing HR into my team meetings. But again, keeping HR outside of that keeps them separate, right? It keeps them seeming and looking like they are the ambulance at the bottom of the cliff, or they aren't part of the business in that way. But bringing them into the team meetings, and actually, there were a couple of companies that I worked at where that's what we did. HR was just part of the team meetings, and we were part of the team. Like, we were really embedded, and that's that business partnering. And that also created a trust that HR is actually there for us. They're not there to be told on to, or that I'm going to get in trouble, or that they only come and do the restructuring and stuff like that. And as you said, it builds that brand, but it also creates a sense of trust and respect between those roles, that they are there for them. And I know that this has come up a lot on your LinkedIn, because I know that you're very active on LinkedIn. You've got a big following, and there's a lot that goes around LinkedIn, especially I would say in the US. This is probably quite huge in the US, where HR is not there for the employees. Like, never trust HR. They're there for the company only. And I don't wholeheartedly disagree with that statement. Again, I think, how is the business setting HR up? How are they talking about them? How are they using them? But that isn't the case. Like, HR genuinely, like, if you talk to people who work in this profession, they genuinely do care about people and the experience that people are having at work. Whether you are an employee or whether you are a leader or a manager or whatever term you want to use. But they're kept separate, and that continues to drive that belief, that continues to drive that idea that HR isn't there. And as a leader, why not? What are you hiding from your HR team that they can't be there in your team meetings? How can HR actually alleviate your leadership burden? This is one of the influencing tactics. What's in it for me? How could this be something beneficial for me? If I bring HR into my team meetings, how could this actually benefit me as a leader? How could this make my job easier? And just even thinking about it that way. So instead of thinking HR is there to spy on me or spy on us and they're going to go report back, if there's anything to report back, then maybe that's like a little self-reflection piece of how you're leading. But I think that that's a really key thing to think about, is if there is resistance with that suggestion, I really want you to explore why that is. Why is there resistance?
I think too, we talked about the brand perception of HR, and I think by inviting HR in, like I said, it's going to help build that brand awareness, and hopefully it's going to shift the mindset of future leaders in your teams, who will then step into leadership and be ready and rearing to go to engage an HR person. If you don't feel comfortable heading straight to team meetings, if that feels a little bit invasive at first, then why not invite them to come sit in your area? I hot desked often in other departments. My last role in corporate before I moved to self-employment was at News Hub. So I would spend so much time actually sitting in the newsroom, and what I learned actually being amongst it was so valuable compared to just being on the second floor underneath them and having a manager come down and have a chat about something that was going on. If I could live it, experience it, feel it, for me, a really big memory was I was in the office at the time of the Christchurch shootings. And the news hub team obviously got the call, and I went straight up there and I sat down and I spent the day in that newsroom. And what I learned in that day about how they operate, how they communicate, how they collaborate, how the journalists work with the editing team, work with the graphics team. What I learned in that day, I supported them moving forward because I got to see it real time in action, and I really felt like I could add more value having known that.
Mm. And how much more confident did that make you feel to then have conversations with the manager about ideas, about advice, about ways to deal with challenges because you actually understood the operations of how that team worked versus you're just getting the story that the manager is telling you about how it works. And that's just your basis of what to give your advice on.
Definitely. And it built my credibility too, because I could speak their language. They could come to me and say, we've got this challenge. And I could rattle off their processes, their people, what I've seen happen, what I've seen work, what I've seen not work. And it was huge. And then when it did come to strategic decision making, when it came to building strategies or making changes, I could recall experiences or point to things that I knew about rather than just theoretical things I read in an HR textbook while I was doing my studies. So it was hugely helpful for me and my credibility, but also the value that I hope to have been able to add to the leaders in that team was invaluable.
And that also comes to the trust and respect piece, because if you can speak their language, if you know how their operations work, there is an inherence of trust that comes from that. It's like Lisa gets it. And
Right.
that only happens if you as a leader allow them to come and see how it works, how it looks. In my last corporate as well, or my second to last corporate, I was immersed in the team that I supported as well. And this comes down to business partnering. Like if you have a business partner model, I mean, we're kind of talking about HR side now, but if you've got a business partner model, like why are they not sitting with the teams that they support? Why are they sitting in this little central hub with all the HR people together? Like, sure, maybe one day a week or maybe, but you don't need to be sitting 24/7 with your HR team. You need to be sitting with the business that you're supporting so that you can build that trust and respect. You can build that presence. You can build that relationship that you can then leverage with those managers. Because if there's a relationship, there's something that you can leverage from that in the way that you give advice, in the way that you give options, things to think about. If they know that you know them and that you get it, they'll be so much more willing to listen.
100%. And I think it comes back to how I summarized HR earlier, being that we are there to help you achieve your goals through your people. And I guess you're right. We need to be led in. HR needs to be led in to help you do that. We can't, like I said, sit as a tack on to the side of the business. We're not working on the business. We need to be working in the business. And that can only happen if leaders let us in. We want to get it. We want to understand your world. We want to be right there alongside you. So let us in.
I love that. Oh, so good. Love those practicals. So have a standing meeting with HR. So if you're not ready to bring them into your team, at least have a one-on-one with them. Bring them into your team meetings, bring them into your world, even if it's just being in your area. Let them see what you do and how your team works. And then thirdly, do some self-reflection around your own capability, your own strengths, your own skills, your own gaps, and how HR can actually help you close them, help you leverage them, help you lead better. So really, really love those practicals. Is there anything else that you wanted to add to this conversation that we didn't cover off or that I didn't ask?
Yeah, I guess to add that if you've had a negative experience of HR in the past, I know there's some not so great HR out there. There's some not so great HR practices out there. I get it. I totally understand. And I get how that can shape your view of the whole function. But for every not so great HR person, there are hundreds more really, really great ones who truly do care. They have the right mindset, the right approach. I mean, it's like anything, right? If you come across a bad accountant, you then just don't write off all accountants as terrible and I'll never use an accountant again. You just find one that's maybe a bit of better fit. And I guess that's hard in a workplace. You can't choose the HR professionals that you work with, most likely. But just don't paint the entire field just off one poor experience. Give HR another chance. They can truly make all the difference if you do engage them in the right way. And if you can build that trust and rapport with them, then, just give them a chance. Leave them in, like I said before.
I love that. And also, if you're not getting what you need from your HR team, so I'm going to be the advocate on the people leader side here. If you aren't getting what you need from your HR team, talk about it. Speak up. Go to the HR team and say, look, I don't believe that I'm getting what I need from this team in order to lead better. how can that change? What can we do differently? How can we engage differently? Because that could also be you, like what you said, Lisa. Like, go and interact with them, create a relationship, but also look at how are your perceptions, your beliefs, your ideas warping the ability to build those relationships. Because how our mindset works is our past will always dictate our future. Our mind has no other way of doing that. It uses past experience unless we short circuit the brain and go, regardless of that past experience, this is how I want to move forward. This is how I want this experience to go. But that has to be active, that has to be intentional. And you need to decide the kind of relationships that you want to have with your HR team as well. And regardless of whether you've had shitty ones in the past, decide how you want them to be now and moving forward. And then how can you show up to build that relationship? This is not about being passive in this relationship either. You can't just sit back and be like, oh, I'll just wait for HR to show up and I'll just wait for HR to do their job and I'll just wait for HR to give me everything that I need. No, everyone needs to be an active participant in all of these dynamics in these relationships. So as much as yes, HR is there to support you as a leader and support your team to be better, it is also your responsibility to go after the things that are going to help you lead better, that are going to help your team be better. That is also your responsibility. So make sure that you're also stepping up and building those relationships with HR, reaching out and looking at how you can leverage them in the best way, because they're there. Unless you work in a small business that doesn't have internal HR, you likely will have a consultant. If your business knows what's good for them, you'll probably have an external consultant. Find ways to build those connections. If you don't have anything in your business, I'm sure that there's someone you know that knows someone that you can reach out to. Be proactive, and always be proactive in how you can lead better and how you can do better by your people.
Yeah, I love that. And I love what you said about taking ownership of taking action yourself, because I don't know if you know much about HR, but it get pretty damn busy. You're in a very reactive role. We could start the day with all these great intentions and this glowing to-do list, and suddenly all of these reactive fires that I talk about come in. So your HR team, they might just be really busy. Maybe they haven't reached out. Maybe they have every intention of reaching out, especially if they hold a role like a business partner, for example. Then that is their function. They're there to partner with you. It's right there in the title. So if you need to reach out, like you said, I'd love to engage you. I'd love to work with you. How can we make that happen? Can I put something in your calendar? And I think that's so important.
Yeah, I love that. Amazing. So we do have just a few minutes. I just want to do some quick fire wrap up questions. What is the best advice you've ever received that's helped you be a great leader?
I'm not in a technical leadership role right now, but I loved being a leader. I had a fantastic manager when I was a leader. Although I didn't engage HR, I had a fantastic leader, and he was really great at sharing books with me, or he was always really invested in my development. And one book that I read was called, I don't know if you've read it, The 1 Minute Manager Meets the Monkey.
No.
I think it's a series. I think 1 Minute Manager was the first, and then the next one was 1 Minute Manager Meets the Monkey. And this idea, this is still carried through to me to this day, the idea of having a monkey on your back. So, well, carrying other people's monkeys. And it's funny, when I was in a leadership role, I literally visualized monkeys jumping off my team members' shoulders and onto my shoulder. So essentially it talks about the idea that it's really easy to jump in and solve problems for your team, but that's not always the best approach. You could be doing them a disservice. You could be putting a monkey on your own back, something that you probably may not have the time to do. So when someone brings you a challenge or a task, a monkey, it's important to assess whether it's your responsibility to handle it or if it's something that they should own. I was very bad, and still am a little bit, at just taking the monkeys. I was like, I know I'll do a good job of it. It'll be done to my standard. So if they come and they need help with something, I'll just say, leave it with me. I'll take it. What I've done is now taken the monkey. That monkey is now hanging out on my back. And now it's my responsibility. I've taken ownership of that. It's up to me now to do that thing. So it's really kind of helping you focus on what you can control and support your team into becoming more independent and helping them grow and develop. So I guess the advice I had was just be very mindful of the monkeys that you're carrying. Don't carry other people's monkeys.
I love that one. And a challenge I always give all my clients that I coach, my leaders, is when you go to a meeting with your team, you need to be the one that has the least tasks when you leave. That is actually your job, is to have the least number of tasks compared to your team when you leave that meeting. Because if you have more than your team, that's not proper accountability and that's not proper delegation. So that's, yeah, I love that one. What is one thing that helps you feel courageous to do scary things?
I talk about this a lot with my HR professionals that I coach. And I think I've spoken a lot about it on LinkedIn actually. For me, and it sounds strange, but I hide behind my job title. So if I don't mean in like a disconnected or inauthentic way, I kind of mean it's more of a mental trick to help push myself. So if I'm facing something out of my comfort zone, if I need to do something really challenging, give feedback, I remind myself that this isn't Lisa Young just going to give this your big scary manager this feedback. I'm the HR business partner of this business. I am tasked with leadership development. This is well within the scope of my role. I'm the person in this role for a reason, and my job title carries this sense of responsibility and there's expectations on me. So sometimes I just put myself in my own place. You are the HR business partner. That is your job title. If you need to remind them of that, then do that. But yeah, for me, hiding behind my job title is a good way to help me step out of my comfort zone.
Oh, I love that one.
Yeah.
That's so good. And what is one boundary that you uphold that supports you to be your best?
I think for me, and since becoming a parent, this has kind of got a lot more important to me, is just protecting my energy. I'm very conscious of what kind of drains my energy and what gives me energy. And so for me, I really want to protect my energy. So whether that is saying no or pushing back on things I know aren't going to be the best for my energy, if it is being more intentional or strategic about how I plan my day. I know a lot of people in corporates or in roles inside workplaces often can't just say, no, won't be coming to that team meeting today. But you can be intentional about, okay, if you know that meeting is maybe going to drain you in some way, or maybe it's going to really invigorate you in some way, how can you use that to your advantage? If the meeting usually leaves you feeling a bit deflated and defeated, maybe it's I don't know, maybe it's been a bad month and it's a sales meeting. You know, you're probably going to leave that meeting feeling a little bit demotivated. What can you do directly after that meeting or directly before that meeting to help ensure you can give it your best? And the opposite too, if you know it's a meeting that always reinvigorates and re-energizes you, how can you utilize it? What do you plan straight afterwards? So yeah, for me, a big boundary is just managing my energy levels and ensuring that I protect that energy.
Oh, I love that one. And I would argue and say, even if you work in corporate, that's not to say you can't say no to things, but you can
Yeah,
definitely
true.
question, it's like, what's the purpose of me attending this meeting? What are you expecting for me to get out of this? So instead of just saying yes, oh yeah, I'll go because my manager invited me or because
Mm.
so and so on the project team invited me, like, again, if you know that there's other things that are taking priority right now, just question. Just asking 1, 2, 3 more questions will either give you more reason to why you have to say no because it's really not making sense, or it also helps the person justify why you actually need to be there
Mm.
rather
Mhm.
than it's just a knee jerk, oh, I'll just invite all of these people. You actually need to justify why I need to be there before I'm going to accept that meeting.
Mm.
And I think that's something everybody needs to build responsibility into and accountability into, especially leaders, because the reason why leaders become so overwhelmed and overworked is because they're saying yes to all the meetings and half of them they don't even need to be in. We need to start working on that.
Tried really hard to do that when I was in a business partner role myself and in leadership roles. Your calendars fill up so quickly, right? Everyone wants your insight, they want your input, and that's great. But you're right, it doesn't always necessarily mean you need to be there. For me, I would often ask maybe for an agenda in advance, or I would say, this is an hour meeting. What is the input you're hoping to get from me? If I don't think it's going to be potentially valuable for me, I might say, look, I'm more than happy to summarize my thoughts on this and send it to you prior to the meeting and not attend. Or look, hey, I can see you've scheduled to have this discussion at X time. I'll pop in at that point for 10 minutes to give my thoughts and insights. So yeah, how can you better ensure that you're contributing in the right way at the right time?
And controlling your time more as well.
Mm.
If you're not in control of your time, other people will control it for you. So needing to be
Yeah.
more intentional.
Yeah.
Amazing. Love that. Thank you so much. And I've really loved this conversation. So where can people get in touch with you? Where are you most active? And we'll pop all of that in the show notes as well.
Oh, thank you. So I spend most of my time on LinkedIn, Lisa Young on LinkedIn, and on there is details of my website and everything. So I work with HR professionals specifically, but I'm sure a lot of leaders can also get in value from my insights as well.
Especially if you want to leverage HR.
Yeah,
So definitely,
absolutely.
definitely worth checking it out. Amazing. Thank you so much, Lisa. And thank you so much for listening to the Lead with Lisa podcast. If you've loved what Lisa has talked about, please reach out to her, connect with her. And as always, let us know what you thought about the episode. All
Yay,
right. Thank you, Lisa.
Thank you.